Welcome to the Friends with Money podcast, brought to you by Money Magazine, creating financial freedom for Australians since 1999.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Friends with Money podcast. My name is Michelle Baltazar, editor-in-chief here at Money Magazine.
And my name is Tom Watson, a senior journalist here, also at Money Magazine. And Michelle, this is the first time we are doing a pod together, finally.
I know, right? We finally got there. You know, it's end of the year. What a nice way to kind of cap the year that was. It's not just another episode. I know that we've got a special treat for all our listeners. We are giving them kind of the top 10 stories that everyone read this year, as well as our most listened to podcasts.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We thought that, as the year's coming to an end, it would be a great chance to have a look back on the topics that not only caught our eye this year, but really resonated with Money's readers and listeners. So to do that, we've taken a dive into the analytics and also some of your feedback from everyone listening at home to pull out the articles and podcasts that were most popular with the Money audience during 2022. But before we kind of crack into some specific topics, Michelle, was there any overarching theme that really stood out to you?
So this is interesting because for the whole year, we've been talking about the cost of living going up, how to save money, people having a lot of financial struggles. But at the same time, it's been a year that a lot of people have really set aside a lot of savings. So our biggest theme this year, surprisingly, is on early retirement.
I know.
And what's called the FIRE movement. So for those of you who don't know what it is, that's the Financial Independence Retire Early movement. In fact, our most listened to podcast was the Can I Retire Now podcast.
It's such a surprise. And that, along with one of the really popular articles on our website, which is actually about retiring in your 20s, obviously really resonated with people. And that article in particular, Michelle, is about, a couple, a man that some of our listeners might be familiar with, Dave Gow, who managed to retire at the age of 28 after earning a relatively modest income of $75,000 each per year on average. And then just through a lot of hard work, a lot of dedicated saving, they were able to purchase some investment properties and then start to get into equities as well, to the point that Dave was able to retire at 28. Just incredible, isn't it?
Absolutely incredible and very inspirational, right? Because if you read the article, it's online, retiring in your 20s. We didn't need as much as we thought. So it's kind of intimidating trying to think, oh, can I really save up enough so that I don't have to work, for the rest of my life or until I'm 80 years old? And this couple, amazing story, he started when he was just 18 years old, just setting aside some money. And the biggest takeaway from me from that is that I think for all of us, we try to save anywhere between 5 to 10% of our income on a monthly basis. His strategy, a little bit more aggressive. So he was saving as much as 25%, then ratcheted it up to about 35% to then 50%. So it's a matter of saying, what is your lifestyle? Is it possible? Based on his story, yes, absolutely. So 28, what were you doing, Tom, when you were, kind of not too far from me, but for me, certainly this has been like a couple of decades ago.
Listen, I was still working as a journalist, obviously, but not saving that kind of money. And I didn't have quite that same kind of goal and dedication that Dave and Alison had. But what about you, Michelle? Something different?
Yes, mid-20s. The highlight of my life was just backpacking through Europe, That's kind of what every Aussie does, straight out of uni. Go to London. I was penniless. I was broke, I think. I must say, full disclosure, I did buy my first property in my 20s, so some of my money was going in there. But reading that story about this couple, it's never too late. You can do it in your 30s, 40s, 50s. Early retirement is within reach for sure.
Absolutely. And now that was quite a kind of a good news story in a way, or at least a very positive one. But another one that really caught our eye this year, and I think a lot of media attention in general, is this kind of massive recurring theme of scams. There just seems to have been a
Mm.
major increase in the number of scams going around. And I had a look at some of the ACCC Scam Watch's figures this morning, and they show that Australians have lost $475 million to scams already. So between January and October, when the data it has been updated to, which is $100 million more than the whole of 2021. So things have just been absolutely ridiculous this year, haven't they,
It's
Michelle?
gotten worse. It's gotten worse. Yes, so our seventh most read article this year was the How Telstra Gave My Details to Crypto Scammers. And that was written by none other than our Ask Paul columnist, Paul Clitheroe.
Mm.
And if you can imagine, I mean, everyone knows the story about the hacking of Optus data and also Medibank. But this one is far more insidious because it's really, through your phone company and just saying, hey, can you transfer the money? And you don't know that there's like a crypto scammer behind the scenes doing it.
That's exactly right. And I think, in Paul's case, he was lucky enough not to lose the $35,000 that they were after. But in another one of our most read stories, Scammers Stole 20K from My Bank Account was the title.
Mm.
What all
Hmm.
these stories go to show, Michelle, is that we are all very vulnerable and that we can all make mistakes, personally and companies as well. So it just goes to show how worthwhile it is to be as vigilant as we can be, and also being really serious about the security that we use on our accounts.
Especially now that you just press one button and then suddenly the transaction's over. Like
Mm,
it's done in a millisecond, and it's very hard to get that money back. Now, I just want to say that with that 20,000 stolen from this woman's bank account, which was our eighth most read article this year, she worked in financial services.
mm.
So the lesson for me is that it's not that it's easy to fool someone, or you're just stupid, you don't know that you're being scammed. The scams these days are so sophisticated, you don't know whether the email or the phone call is coming from the real bank or a fake entity.
That's
So
right.
it's quite scary.
It is, and like you said before, so insidious as well. But moving on, Michelle, one of the other kind of most read articles on our website this year was one that I think surprised you a little bit, and this was
Yes.
Mark Chapman from our H&R Block's article on how to avoid capital gains tax when selling property. So why did it surprise you so much?
Oh, yes. So this one, we had mixed feedback on this one. We had some of our readers kind of write to us and say, Michelle, people shouldn't be avoiding tax. Tax is part of life, Oh, don't dodge your CGT duties, right? But I think what the reason why this was one of our most read articles is that I don't think it's really clear to people what are your tax obligations once you've sold off your home, right?
Mm,
Whether it's the house you live in, or it's your investment property. But more so because in the old days, you live in one house and you're there for 30, 40 years. But society these days, we kind of move around. So you may have lived in your first home for like 4 or 5 years, and then you move to another. And so this article was really popular because it kind of lists when are you eligible to kind of not have to pay the CGT costs, but also even like the little details like you do have to pay tax for if you have a land that's it's more than 2 hectares, then you have to pay tax for the rest of that. But that was we did get mixed feedback from that one.
I think it was interesting personally because I just didn't know a lot at all about CGT, and I think Mark really kind of lays it out very well. But kind of more generally, I think maybe it's a sign that despite everything that's been happening in the property market this year, that a lot of people are still looking to downsize or upsize and are wanting reassurance about their tax obligations when they go do that.
Yes, something, little details that are quite important. People assume that for a property to be considered your main residence, you have lived in it for many years or at least a couple of years. But in fact, by law, as long as you've lived there for a minimum of 3 months,
Mm.
or even 6 months, then the property can be considered your main residence and you can be exempt from CGT. One of our biggest themes, if we don't talk about property on money, we do talk about shares. So this was again one of our biggest themes. But surprisingly, we still had a lot of people clicking on stories around starting with shares or investing in shares for the first time. So what did you think about that, Tom?
Yeah, I was surprised, but I guess there's still a lot of interest. A lot of people obviously jumped into the market for the first time during the COVID period in 2020 and 2021, but there's still people doing that. But I think the fact that two of our podcasts, Smart Investing for the Bargain Hunter and also Investing in Turbulent Times, they really show that people are curious about what they should be doing at the moment, maybe looking for a little bit of reassurance that they're on the right track. And I think for most people, that will have been kind of a bit of a steady as she goes mentality, but also looking for opportunities in this market, even though it has been so turbulent. So really interesting to see, and also encouraging to see that the people are still very interested and very engaged in what the equity markets are doing.
We did get some feedback from our readers who read the articles you wrote actually on share trading and the share trading platforms, the top 5 apps, for example.
Mm,
And they were really thankful that we've shared that information because while it's been a rocky time in the share market this year, the one thing that I always kind of know from all the fund managers, all the successful fund managers that I've interviewed is that it's not timing the market, but it's really time in the market. So you just let time work for you. Don't worry whether is it a good time to invest in shares today or should I wait.
absolutely. I love that you brought that up. But just before we move on, Michelle, one other kind of point on the investing theme that we had a lot of interest in was a podcast we did on rent vesting, and I think that just goes to
Yes.
show that that even though house prices have come off a little bit this year, that they're still relatively high. So people are still looking for ways to enter the market, even if it's not necessarily where they themselves want to live. So if that's you, I would definitely recommend in and going back in the feed and having a listen to that podcast because it was really insightful.
Yes, definitely. And the thing right now with interest rates going up, and if you were the homeowner just really covering the financial burden of the mortgage repayments, it's really tough. But with rent vesting, you are getting income. You do have a tenant and kind of helping you with that, and that's really the concept behind rent vesting. Again, the average price of property now is around 1.2 million, which
Mm,
is insane. But with rent vesting, you can start with 400, 500,000 properties and rent it for a reasonable rate. And again, just let time in the market work for you.
time. It's all about time, and that is a lovely segue to another topic that we talk about all the time. One that really also resonated with our audience this year and one that requires a lot of time as well, which is super. So Michelle, what were some of the articles and podcasts that really caught your eye and listeners and readers' eyes this year?
Supa is one of my favorite topics, and I know that when we did the readership survey, Tom, someone said, "Oh, I really appreciate your love your super campaign." But then another person said, "Michelle, can you please stop talking about super? I had enough of super." But I'm like, "No, you can't. You need to know what are the benefits of super. I'm such a super
We can
nerd
never have
for
enough.
but you can never have enough because it's truly an incredibly powerful tool to save money without even realizing it. Because as soon as you hit, you're 18 years old, you're working, superannuation is coming into your super fund
Mm.
slash effectively your bank account. So we had one of our top podcasts was the one that where you interviewed Vita, called Maximizing Your Super at Every Age. So again, 20s, 30s, 60s, it's definitely worth it. And this one, it's almost like watching a train wreck, but a lot of people clicked on our story on the five worst performing super funds in Australia.
Yeah,
They
that's
they
right.
they just want to know, are they in the bottom of the list or what? But yeah,
You don't want to see your own fund on that list, do you? So I think that's a lot of the the interest in articles like that is making sure that that you're with a super fund who's doing a good job, relatively.
yes,
That is.
just not the worst. And I know that for those who are longtime readers of Money Magazine, we just published the best of the best
Mm,
2023 issue. So that's out right now. And that will tell you what are the highest performing super funds at the moment. In fact, the winner this year delivered something like anywhere between 10 to 15% return in the year when other super funds have gone
wow.
backwards. So, yes, it's definitely worth looking at how your super fund's doing.
And that's in the December and January issue of Money Magazine, which you can, as Michelle said, purchase right now. Michelle, before we finish up, though, one last topic and articles I wanted to bring up. It's a very
Yeah.
future focused topic and a really positive one as well, which is an article for our website, which was amongst the most popular of the year on why buying an electric car could soon get cheaper. And I really love this story because it is positive, and it also signals an interest that many Australians are really thinking about EVs at the moment. So,
Yes. It feels like the public has voted. We do
mm,
care about the environment. We want to be smarter about how we consume energy and certainly, driving, especially now with a lot of people not wanting to live in the city. So they might want to live 15 minutes away from the CBD. So it's important to just be mindful of the cost of petrol, for example,
mm,
but also at the same time, like you said, this is really an incredibly positive story because people are thinking about EVs and how they could get a cheaper deal next year. So tell me a little bit more. So what's happening next year? Why are EVs going to get cheaper sooner than later?
yeah. So, in essence, low and zero emissions vehicles are going to be exempt from fringe benefits tax following legislation that was passed in federal parliament a couple of months ago. And the crux of that is that it could potentially save electric vehicle buyers thousands of dollars. And I should say that not everyone is going to be in a position to buy an EV at the moment because A, they're still quite expensive in Australia, and B, because of the wait times that we've been seeing in recent years. But this move will hopefully help buyers now, and then in the future, hopefully help supply in the secondhand EV market in the years to come. So hopefully it helps everyone at the end of the day, and we start to see a bit more of an uptick in the rate of EV adoption in Australia.
So does that mean you'll be driving around in a Tesla next year, Tom?
Listen, I wouldn't put my money on it, and if I did have, well, I probably needed a little bit more money to put on it to buy that car in the first place. But no, maybe not next year, Michelle, but hopefully in the future because I definitely like one.
Yes. So I think if you ask me, it's around the world in 365 days. But what are all our money readers and listeners keen on in 2022? One is the early retirement movement. So anything to do with retiring early gets a lot of interest. We talked about scams. We talked about rent vesting and just making sure that you're not paying CGT. Just finding out the rules around disposing your property. Then we talked about starting with shares, starting investing in shares for the first time, and finally wrapping it up. And I know we have mixed feedback on this, but super and how you can save more through your super.
Something on the super front that came up when actually when we were doing the maximizing your super at every age podcast with Vita, as you mentioned before, was super sacrificing. It's something that I'd been meaning to do for years, but that conversation really made me get off my butt and make it happen. And I think it also did the same for producer Mike, who I'm sure would chime in if he wasn't busy making sure that we're doing a good job on here. So that was a really excellent thing for me to do myself, and I'd really encourage anyone else to do the same, because it's just a simple conversation with the payroll department, and it was a lot quicker and easier than I thought it would be. So a really good practical thing to do.
Yes, salary sacrifice. That's amazing that you that kind of encourage you to do that, because it's like magic. You just email the payroll officer and just say, hey, you know what, I want to sacrifice X%. And something that maybe not a lot of people know is that if you save your money outside super, you are doing that under your personal tax rate.
Mm.
So whether you're 30%, 40%. But under super, technically it's under 15% tax rate. But by the time they combine all the concessions and benefits of being under your superannuation fund, you are paying an effective tax rate of 7%.
Wow, so much better.
So, yes, and if you do that now and then think about it over 20, 30 years, you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars in savings.
Well, I'm glad you
So
said
good
that,
on you,
Michelle.
Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Making
yeah,
me feel very
yeah,
good
yeah.
about that decision now.
You can buy a yacht with it, but so or an EV. Maybe we'll go with an
I
electric
think that's a
car.
good idea. Yep.
So for me, I mean, just very quickly, I was surprised that none of our home loan stories made it to our top 10.
Mm.
I know that this is something that's been, top of mind for everyone with interest rates going up. My big money move this year was definitely refinancing my investment property loans, just making sure that I've got the sharpest rate, because there are so many home loan providers out there, so many products, and you're looking at anywhere between maybe as little as a 0.2% difference between your home loan and what's out there to as much as 2 to 3%. And that all adds up. All you have to do, it's very easy. Look at your home loan rate. Look at the home loan rate that your own bank is offering to anyone who's just applying for a home loan. And if there is a difference, you need to call them and say, mate, you need to give me a better deal. And I did that, Tom. I
Mm.
did that. And in 5-10 minutes, they said, sure, you've been with us for X number of years. We'll look after it. It takes into effect a month from now or so. And that was just liberating to know that, I did that this year.
How brilliant. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening as well that have either done that themselves or are thinking about it. So probably good encouragement for them as well.
Absolutely. So I know that we will be doing another episode in the coming weeks on our outlook for 2023, what's to expect next year. But certainly, I hope everyone enjoyed listening to this podcast where we kind of just whizzed through all the big stories of 2022.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure chatting, Michelle, and also bringing you podcasts throughout the year, listeners. So wishing everyone a very prosperous new year and hopefully a well-deserved break too. And we've, as Michelle said, we've got a lot of great episodes to come in the year ahead. But we'll see you again next week on the Friends with Money podcast.
Yes. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode or you want to tell us what was the biggest money move that you did this year, please do so through our dedicated email podcast@moneymag.com.au. And thinking of gifts for the money team, feel free to leave a review on iTunes or the Apple Podcast app if you have enjoyed listening to us this year. And finally, make sure you head over to moneymag.com.au for all our financial news and stories over the holiday break and well into the new year. So that's it for this episode. Thank you so much. I'm Michelle Baltazar. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Friends with Money podcast. For credible, independent, and easy to understand financial commentary, visit moneymag.com.au. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are general in nature, and further independent advice and research based on your personal circumstances should be sought before making an investment decision.